This might win Destiny 2 video title of the year. Generic Destiny hating algo slop number 247. So good. What is he? Is he talking about this or is this just bait? Am I getting baited again? Is this another leopard moment?
So the first thing you gotta do is put on Journey featuring Chrono's quartet. Then you have to sigh. You have to be like, then you have to use cliched breakup lines like, what we used to have was special, but lately I've been thinking about other games. You used to always be there for me at my lowest points, and I feel awful doing this over text, but it's the best way for me to get my thoughts out as clearly and concise and make sure I don't make any. Wait a second. Why does every video on my YouTube feed sound like this right now? Hey, friends. Hey, get your hand off that playback speed button. We're gonna get rolling at breakneck speed. So, I did the generic breakup intro, that's what every video on my feed sounds like lately, and as grim as the state of the game is perceived to be right now, I don't think it's the fabled make or break moment because there isn't
What? Not the make or break moment? Unbelievable. Not the 14th time we've said this?
enough competition. There still isn't. I mean, we have Borderlands and Warframe, sure, but those aren't Destiny enough. The real make or break moment is if Marathon and Renegades fail simultaneously. Let's keep it rolling, we got a lot to.
That is a good point, actually. And here's the thing I would say is that Destiny 2 and there being like a Destiny killer game, right? Like a game that comes along and steals the whole audience is what we've been kind of anticipating at a certain point. But Destiny itself seems like they could just shoot themselves in the foot enough that people don't want to play the game. Keep that in mind. There doesn't necessarily need to be a Destiny killer, like another game that comes along that overshadows Destiny. Destiny could be mismanaged so poorly that it kills itself. I hope that's not the outcome. I'm not asking for that to be the outcome, but that is a possibility. There never has to be a Destiny killer. It would just be Bungie is the Destiny killer. They just mismanaged it into the ground.
Cover. So, as just a generic disclaimer that's probably going to span most of the video, Destiny muddies its identity in an attempt to cater to different groups at different times of the year at the inevitable expense of other groups. Unintentional or not, this leads to overall larger buy-in for the player population despite wavering player satisfaction that brings in and pushes away different and new generations of Destiny groups.
This is a really interesting analysis that he's brought up, actually. So what he's saying is that through the course of a calendar year, Bungie will distribute their focus to different areas of the game. So different people will be more happy different times of the year, for example. I'm not sure exactly if this is, I would say 100% accurate because there's probably just a core group of people that just want to play PvE. But it does feel this way, at least if, like, you're, for Cammy, for example, he's a big PvP guy. It feels like there's times where they actually give the PvP community some attention and, like, help build that up. And there's times where they just seem to completely ignore them, you know? It's being a Destiny 2 PvP player is significantly more depressing than being a Destiny 2 PvE player, right? The PvE side of things, there's like, hey, there's like new activities, new story missions, you know, new builds, you know. PvP, it's like there's a golden age for maybe a year, and then it's just like the dark ages for 2 years straight.
Almost a yearly cycle. Every season, a new generation of Destiny players learn what Destiny specifically means to them. From there on, that's one more generation that Bungie has to juggle demands from. Because of Destiny's perpetual identity crisis, no matter what I say, I'll anger a substantial portion of the player base. There are easily 10 plus player archetypes at odds with one another in the game.
Yes. Oh my god, this is so good. This is exactly part of the problem with the Destiny 2 community. Like, think about this. There's people in Destiny 2 that only play PvP, right? You can name countless content creators. They only exist in PvP. Then there's people that only do like PvE stuff. Then there's people that only do like lore. And then there's people that only care about like fashion. And then there's people that weirdly they only like Gambit for some god awful reason. And there's people that only, and then even within PvE, there's like these, you know, subsystems or archetypes of people where there's the more casual PvE person who's just there for the narrative, right? They just care about the story. And then there's those that, you know, just like playing chill versions. There's a PvE player that never goes into raids ever. They play the game regularly. They just never go into raids. They don't like the stress or dealing with the community BS. There's just countless other people all existing in the same space, all conveying for different things. And Bungie kind of keeps them all like roped along year after year.
General, I advocate against my own in-game preferences in favor of community sentiment that I believe has the greatest chance to bolster the population numbers. In terms of opinions, I've learned to answer for feedback in all four of the following ways combined, kind of like a politician. This is what I think the best move is for population numbers. That's number one. Number two, here is feedback from an expert point of view. Novices might become experts in the future, so do with this as you will, but always defer to boosting the population. Number three, this is my personal opinion on the matter. I'm only really mentioning this so you can build a profile on what kind of player I am. Number four, emphasis on potential critical failure points that seem to stem from conflicting ideas being forced onto the game in the exact same space. Sometimes it feels like the devs need to gather enough ammunition to break through the toxic positivity cycle that has already doomed many games. Not going to go into that. Also, content creators are not solely to blame.
This guy's got a whole numerical bullet point system. He's got it organized, categorically systematized. He knows exactly what he's going into. I like this. This isn't just your typical just get on the video and complain for 10 minutes, upload. This is, very organized. Let's jump into this actually.
Players are drafted for both feedback summits and playtest. If Bungie really listened to content... Alright, let editing Cammy just interject right here. I'm not part of the creator program. I opted out. This is from the heart. This is real. Insert generic salty comment villainizing content creator. If Bungie really listened...
So he's not a Bungie creator, so he's speaking of the Bungie creator program.
...to content creators, in PvE we'd have Borderlands-style shiny loot chases, robust gambling crafting systems to guarantee a desired playstyle for the cost of a lot of full game investment, and truly intrinsic replayable content with a suite of difficulty options allowing for both power fantasy and contest experiences alike. We'd have clan housing and sparrow racing by now. In PvP, we'd have a separate game at this point. Destiny.
This is why I've been advocating for the separation of these two sandboxes altogether. While it is nice, it's been a good run watching Destiny go with the two of them. Destiny as a PvE only game, separate from a PvP only game, would be incredible. But I don't know. We would never see something like that. And I know that people would say, well, I like to have, I like to take my PvE guns into PvP. Yep, that's fine. But the level of depth that the PvE would go to if it was a PvE only game would be crazy. And the same thing would be said for a PvP only game. The problem is balancing two sandboxes together in tandem, and every time one thing breaks, it fucks up the other, and you can only take the game so far in one direction with one thing without damaging the other. It's partly problematic. It just makes it more difficult to introduce new things into the game. It's always been Destiny's strength and weakness, right? It's like the strength of Destiny is like it's so cool that you just like pick up a gun, and when you go around shooting the aliens on the Cosmodrome, it's the same gun, the same feel as when you go into the Crucible, the same, reload speed and everything, right? That's been one of Destiny's strengths, but in terms of developmental difficulty, it's significantly more difficult to develop a game like that.
The Golden Age Arena, fit with an advanced Forge mode, a Fiesta Party playlist where chaos ensues, and a competitive mode where the game is fine-tuned to feel dynamic despite climbing the skill ladder. Success here ties back to the PvE version of the game with cosmetics and so forth. I promise you content creators don't have a secret evil meeting set on adding more microtransactions, time gates, and convolution to game systems. They aren't here giving pointers on how to make the new player experience worse. Let's put the lens back on Bungie and the community. We're listening. That's kind of obfuscating the truth, if I said that word correctly. They're, in fact, listening, but what the hell are they supposed to do with conflicting feedback? A while ago, I did a viewer and Twitter poll on various...
Yeah, that was actually a really good point. The feedback of we're listening is very shallow, and it's kind of suffices to just answer that, hey, we are reading the feedback, but it's a whole nother thing when you read the feedback and you take it further than we're listening and go through and illustrate exactly in what ways you are listening and in what ways you're choosing to implement said feedback from the audience. Just a generic, we're listening it's very shallow, and it's not necessarily pandering or frustrating. It's just initially it didn't feel bad because we're like, okay, Bungie, they're listening, and obviously the feedback is varied, but it's like we need more than that. We need in-depth articles of like, okay, this is the future, or this is the direction we want to take things. More communication would always be better. In fact, I argue that with more communication, we would have never gotten ourselves in the hole that is the portal right now. The portal has cost Bungie a ton of developmental effort. It's burned them millions of dollars, surely, because it launched the Edge of Fate poorly. To what are we at now? Gosh, I don't even know if I want to look at it anymore. Oh, Edge of Fate is now 40% off now. Oh, it went up to 4% reviews. At the lowest point, it was 3%, but we got a couple new ones in there and went up to 4. So we're at 4% positive reviews, right? We could have bypassed all of this with better feedback, I think.
Divisive Destiny topics. The results were hilarious, with close to 50% for most of the answers. In all seriousness, I firmly believe that feedback doesn't matter at all when it's up to Bungie to finally pick a direction and just go. But time and time again, like recently, they pump the brakes and hit reverse back to the starting point, or worse. All that does is reinforce that loud, visceral complaining gets results, and they're guaranteed to infuriate 50% of the player base at any turn. In my opinion, I wish Bungie would pick a direction and go, disregarding feedback externally and tripling down on shattering a culture of toxic positivity internally.
That's a crazy statement, right? I've liked everything he said up until that point, because whenever they have decided in the past to double down and triple down and just brute force through the feedback and say like, no, we are Bungie, we have Bungie magic, we're creative geniuses, we can pull this off, that has always led them down a very dark path. They hit the brick wall. Like, I'll give a good example with like Gambit, right? They decided, we're making this new game mode, we're investing all this money into it. Gambit launches, and it has not the best reception. It falls off the cliff in terms of popularity and interest almost immediately. It garners a ton of negative community sentiment, and it basically is a mode that's created to rival the hype and the success of Battle Royale. The two launch around the exact same time. The Battle Royale's massive success in Gambit. And then they double down with Gambit, and they're like, aha, we're doing a whole season with Gambit. We're doing Gambit Prime. And the community's uproar gets louder and louder. If they just kept going on with that, they're just like, no, this game is Gambit. We're going Gambit Extra Prime. We're going Gambit Grandmaster Prime. I think that really does not help. I don't think that Bungie doubling, tripling down, quadrupling down on the things that their creative vision led them to is always the best result. I think that Gambit is a good example of Bungie having an idea that really no one asked for, implementing it, and it failing, and then having to pivot afterwards, And people will say, hey, Gambit wasn't that bad. They just needed to add more new maps. Gambit Prime wasn't that bad. I had fun, etc., etc. But ultimately, where we're at in terms of current day Gambit situation, it speaks volumes for what Gambit has done for Destiny 2. Gambit probably needs to be brought out back behind the barn and put down.
At the end of the day, they'll make the game they want to make. While I'm on the topic, I think we should go back to the old motto. We make games we want to play. And if I and others don't like the game, that's fine, we'll play something else. But for the players who like the game, they will for once love the game with fewer compromises. Where listening doesn't also mean we're correctly interpreting. While the player could be to blame for not saying what they really mean, the developers are equally or more to blame for creating an illusion the player often doesn't realize they're living in. A good common example of this is when Destiny players say they want a grind, when what they really want is they want to gamble. The same players complaining about an arbitrary grind for tier 5 loot
are talking about crafted weapons versus random RNG. We want a grind in the game, but I think that if we were to give that like more of a definition, we want a meaningful grind. You want a game where you can invest more time, and the more time, the more powerful you get. I think that is fun and very rewarding. Obviously, that fulfills like the sort of power fantasy that Destiny taps into. I think that a grind just for the sake of a grind is obviously not what we want. We learned that lesson very well with the launch of Edge of Fate and the Portal. No one is just interested in make number bigger for no reason, doing old missions, right? That did not appeal to very many, and you can see the population charts and how they match that.
The same players that farm the most boring encounters imaginable for a 1 out of 500 chance at a competitive weapon roll that they might not even utilize enough in the endgame to justify the time spent to upgrade. I'm not defending the new system, but it actually gives better odds to leave a season with more god rolls than the previous season. This is especially true if you realize that tier 1 gear is functionally competitive with the right roll, and it can drop on the way to 451 power.
Yes, thank you. This is a point I've been talking about a lot, that there's a weird disconnect where a tier 1 god roll is better than a trash tier 5 hollow foil roll. Like the the shininess of it, and all the masterwork stuff doesn't matter more than the perks on them. And he knows this more than anyone. He's obviously plays a lot. He's very good at the game, and so I think where there's this weird disconnect where we're so interested in the tier 5 god roll holofoil that our inability to get that is infuriating to the community. Which, don't get me wrong, I want to get the tier 5. I'm still not even 470 yet. I'm trying to. I'm just logging in. I'm playing. We're getting there. Eventually, we're gonna get those tier 5 holofoils, surely. But on the way, right now, I have like a dozen tier 4 god rolls, and I was able to clear the epic raid in contest just fine with my tier 4 god rolls, and I was able to clear the desert perpetual contest original just fine with my tier 3 god rolls at that point.
This to say that although this player demographic has proven that they willingly put themselves through a bad experience to gamble if the loot is immediately enticing enough, keyword immediate, the player will only care about the absolute best and nothing in between when it comes to gambling. They might not admit it, but I suspect they'd rather spend 500 hours shooting into a loot cave where at any point they could get the best god rolls than to spend 100 hours slap leveling in the portal to then spend 5 hours shooting in a loot cave to get that same god roll, but faster. The key takeaway is that when this player demographic says we want more of a grind, what they effectively mean is we want Bungie to make loot more enticing and random like Borderlands, which puts Bungie in an interesting predicament where they have to weigh different forms of sunsetting to not risk too much power creep trivializing content, because otherwise the player wouldn't want the loot to begin with. The power creep is so bad right now that functionally you don't even need guns. You can run some of the hardest content in the game abilities only. But
this is true. I'm literally running around just using behemoth melee right now, like barely shooting my gun. Maybe the icebreaker just to blow up the crystals, but that is funny. It's accurate.
Some of these players also want a conflicting wish of keeping their previously owned weapons functionally competitive, which can lead to the impending power creep. PvP players are especially vocal here since certain gun rolls quite literally define and enable a fun playstyle. If sunsetting robbed them of that role without an immediate replacement, I could see them quitting the game. For what it's worth, I do think Bungie had some great ideas for side grades and alternative weapon ideas. However, some overtuned loot slipped through the cracks and made power creep untenable for as long as it should have held the illusion glue together. Back on topic, do you see how any forms of feedback...
So that is really interesting. He's talking about just power creep and the difficulty of bringing new loot into the game and how to balance it. You have to bring new stuff into the game. It has to be more powerful. And tier 5s are definitely, I mean, all those perks, enhanced and even enhanced origin trait, definitely very, very powerful versions of those weapons. And it makes it difficult making the old weapons viable still after you introduce these weapons. And people want a grind in the game, but I think what people really want in terms of when they say they want to grind, they want a reason to log in and play every day. And as you've like chewed through all this content, you're like, it's basically like you're, imagine Destiny 2 as like a marathon, right? And collecting everything. It's like every time something new comes out, you're just going 20 feet back from the finish line because you already have 95, 98% of everything in the game. So when they introduce a couple new things, you're just like, okay, I'm 20 feet away from the finish line again. So you just keep clearing the marathon you just chew through all the new stuff so fast, there's nothing for you to do. A new player, of course, jumps into the game and they're like, holy shit, I gotta unlock like fucking 300 exotics and I gotta, get all these weapons, all these god rolls, and like, I gotta clear all these campaigns. They've got like a couple thousand hours in front of them, It is a true marathon for the new players to jump in. They're like, wow, this is gonna be a long time before I'm caught up with the top tier players in the game right now. And so it's like this never-ending issue that just goes on, and then it gets more problematic in a game like Destiny and an MMO style game like this as you go late into the later years.
All essentially ask Bungie to come to the same few conclusions, either create a better illusion or separate the sandboxes and games. The real downward spiral of the game is that the illusion inevitably gets weaker the longer the game exists from being perpetually solved. So the devs have to get more and more creative, which doesn't seem realistic to keep on going this long. The most obvious illusion was to put a 3 on the box and force a hard sunset. Perhaps do it one better and fully commit to the Diablostiny or World of Destiny craft that they keep flip-flopping on over the years. Like, just make the game that way if you want the game to be that way. Stop these half measures. The portal, in my opinion, was a failed illusion. My own portal feedback can pretty much be summarized by Esoteric's video. Advocating for the community, I think the portal is a failure to hobbyists but a small success to the newer and more casual Destiny fans. If it does stay, it needs to streamline that 15 minutes to play on my lunch break vibe while removing its necessity to progress in the game. I personally don't think the portal is all bad, since it, for the first time ever, gives us contest deltas for the other 350 days of the year when we don't have a contest raid or dungeon. Obviously, like the ESO video goes into detail, I wish I could separate trash modifiers from the power deltas, and Bungie has mentioned that they're planning on that. You're going to see that my theme for feedback in this video is advocating for a new illusion for Destiny. Just putting a 3 on the box would be the illusion some players need to start appreciating more of the good and less hyperfixation on the bad. It would also give old players who quit a reason to be curious again. And there are things to be curious about. We got the best raid and a host of some of the most interesting sandbox changes in a long time, which to some is the game itself. And for whatever reason, players are tunnel vision on an effectively meaningless portal grind when they could have been intrinsically enjoying the game on their way up to tier 5 loot, which is also effectively meaningless for all but contest raiders, speedrunners, trial sherpas, and comp grinders. The saddest part of the illusion breaking, leading to worse community sentiment, is that Bungie's attempt to bet the house on the portal illusion seems to have come at the expense of, in my opinion, the real replayable part of Destiny 2 that other shooters just can't seem to beat at Destiny's own niche. Yes, I'm talking about PvP. But PvP isn't free from illusions either. We have experiential FOMO every other week with new time gate gear, seasonal artifacts, sandbox updates, and suspiciously timed bugs. Most PvP players need these interferences to force them to change their playstyle out of their own will and volition. An illusion, you could say. While I personally dislike PvP being flavor of the annoying week, it does get results in keeping boring players varied for their own sake. Unfortunately, I see through the illusion. 10 weeks of different annoyances to me is still 10 weeks of annoyances. The reason I still stick around is that I basically hit Grandmaster status so I can afford myself the luxury to competitively deviate from whatever the flavor of the week is and run whatever appropriate aesthetic choice gets the job done. Whatever hoops I have to jump through this week to get a gunfight is just a trade-off for a bigger player population. This illusion helps bolster that population. Boredom is why I suspect the middle bracket of PvPers leave. This is basically how I've always approached the game. Personal opinion now. If there was ever a game that had Destiny DNA without the live service illusion slop, I'd immediately hop ship and grind that PvP game instead. Unfortunately, Marathon's genre creates a different illusion that I'm also not a fan of, so I'll have to wait if a Destiny PvP standalone game exists, if ever. Otherwise, I'll do the next best thing and continue to play Destiny PvP till the wheels fall off. The population is
That's about it for most Destiny content creators at this point. They're like, this game is not perfect by any means, but it is still the best in its genre, and by default it wins then, you know? And that's kind of the issue with the competition in this sort of looter space with the first person looter shooter genre. There's just no game that even comes close. Like, the next closest game is Warframe, and it's not first person by any means, and it doesn't have nearly the end game that Destiny 2 does. And then I guess the third in slot might be like Borderlands, and Borderlands is cool, but you know, it's no Destiny, let's be real.
Enough that I notice a lot of unplayable PvP lobbies, but high key, the map pool and power ammo systems contribute to more poor games more than connection. So it's not that I don't still want to play, it's that I cannot sometimes. I have to wait until peak hours to find the right conditions to have a net enjoyable play session. To be clear, I don't consider a good play session dropping 50 bombs on repeat. I like when the game state is dynamic and I have opportunities to do cool things even if I don't land them or win the match. Modern matchmaking and game balance makes these opportunities way more scarce than they should be. I said the phrase net enjoyable, which kind of reminds me of Bungie's balancing slogan, net fun. Essentially, the player needs to have more positive feelings by enjoying using something more than the negative feelings associated with dying to that same thing. I'm too deep in the weeds to appropriately give feedback on this one, but I'm curious about what the middle PvP bracket thinks, since they're so overwhelmed by Destiny's sandbox, almost every death is too much of a mystery to even worry about. Me, on the other hand, I see an Atheros Embrace loadout and basically am forced to swap to a Glaive, and I have to block, as the only realistic way to prevent a random death. Another example is Cryosthesia and Diamond Lances. I'm practically their biggest...
Dude, I'm so far out of the PvP arena that he's talking about these like broken exotics, and I'm like, I don't even remember the last time I had to deal with this, you know? The ignorance is bliss right here. You know, I used to be knee deep in the PvP BS, always logging in, always playing against the next broken thing. Now I play PvP about as casual as you possibly could. Maybe go to the lighthouse once a week. That's about it for me.
Stop. With the way that teams are lobby balanced, I have no earthly clue what to do to avoid being frozen from my team's misplays. I struggle to fathom how this fits into the net fun balancing scheme, but like I said, I'm really too far gone in PvP to feel that this feedback is meaningful, just a little side tangent for my commuters to enjoy. The next topic is the new player experience. While some would say the new player onboarding system is one of the worst gaming has to offer, I don't think it's the number one priority to get right now. First of all,
Interesting. I actually agree with this, so I'm really curious to see what points he comes up with.
Bungie will likely be overhauling mini game-wide systems, so they'd have to redesign onboarding to reflect the new changes. I do believe the Star Wars collab episode, you know what, we're going to call them seasons. I do believe the Star Wars collab season will be a draw to new players, so I'd imagine the devs are crunching like crazy to hit the obvious deadline for both a system overhaul and new player onboarding to go alongside it so that they can enjoy the Star Wars season. We can all sense the desperation from Bungie with the recent flip-flopping on progression systems. It wouldn't surprise me if we see the classic break glass in case of typical suspects like Black Shaders, Nostalgia Bait, Sparrow Pod Racing.
Hey, let's go. SRL, we'll take it. We'll take the nostalgia bait.
Pantheon 2 for FOMO rewards, Ludopaloozas, and intentionally...
How about break glass in case of emergency, bring back Wrath of the Machine in November.
crafting
and bring back Siva to the Plague Lands.
Bugs. In the past, Bungie has described their job as upgrading an airplane while the airplane is already in the air. With their budget and manpower spread to other projects, I'm suspicious...
That is an interesting analogy. Upgrading the airplane while the airplane is already in the air. And the reason why they say that is because it's live service and the game is already live. While the machine is going, you know, while the game is happening, there's real problems happening that need to be mitigated and worked through, while simultaneously having to focus on the future of like, okay, well, how do we excite people, while simultaneously having to like entice new players to get in, and while having to compete against these like huge juggernaut games out there that are just vacuuming in all these new players and stealing everyone's attention, and they have a marketing budget that's, you know, 20x that of Bungie's marketing budget, right? And so all these elements are all working simultaneously, and Bungie has to compete against this. Very difficult.
That they might not have the funds, creative or monetary-wise, to dig out of the design debt they found themselves in, unless the other projects yield commercial success. I'm not counting out Marathon at all, considering the amount of feedback...
I am. It's done. It's cooked. I'll call it right now. You know what I'm saying? I'll call it for you.
...given to it with its edge on the console market. It can also achieve wider success by...
That is actually a really valid point, though. Because of its edge on the console market. So what he's saying is that Marathon is an extraction shooter that is going to launch on console, and that's going to give it a big edge, because I don't know that there's many extraction shooters on console right now. So the idea is that even if the salty PC elitists and Twitter, you know, rage baiters or whatever want to flame on the game, it being kind of early into this extraction shooter space on console gives it a distinct advantage, because the console community is still very massive. If you notice the Steam charts, we've recently been talking about how like, oh, the population's only 20,000 people. Well, the cumulative population between Xbox, PlayStation, Steam, and even you could throw in Epic Games there, which is probably pitiful. But between all four platforms, it's like 300,000 on the same days that it's like 20,000 on Steam. So that means that while there's 20,000 people on PC, there's 280,000 roughly on console. So it shows you the drastic difference in terms of popularity from console players playing games to PC players, at least in regards to Destiny 2. It's not that way for all games, but for Destiny 2, it's been that way. And part of the reason why is because Destiny 1 launched on console, so it built this massive console community, and year after year after year, that community stays with the platform they originated on, because we're just creatures of habit. You know, no one really wants to upgrade you other than just going from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5, and then in 2 years from now, you're going to be on a PlayStation 6. You know, no one wants to swap platforms. And so them launching on console might actually be their saving grace. In fact, this is a really good point that I want to talk about more in future videos, because that is strategically probably the only thing that makes Marathon turn any sort of profit, is it being on console at this point.
Its X factor to distinguish itself from others in the same genre. But on the other hand, Marathon is seen as damaged goods by the greater game sphere due to an art scandal and Bungie's poor response to it. So, speculating here, if Marathon also fails, then what exactly does life support look like for Destiny? Is it gonna maintain like Destiny 1? Is it gonna fizzle out? Are we gonna have to pay for server space directly to access it? Is Bungie gonna send it off with a bang and squeeze as much exit profit as possible while setting up the Destiny 3 gambit behind closed doors? I couldn't guess. I just hope they have enough supplies and reserves to give it one more chance of attempting to solidify the identity of the game and full sending it. Illusion.
Optimistic thinking there, and I think it's a really interesting point to talk about, which is that Marathon and its success is definitely going to be important for the future success of Bungie. I do hope that the game does well. I'm not preying on its downfall by any means. It's just, given what we saw, it had a very lukewarm reception, even regardless of the art theft. I think that the art theft stuff is like, oh, that's crazy, they stole some art, shame on them. And like they fixed it and then they moved past it, right? And like it was like there'll be like this crazy thing. But the game's quality is really what matters more than anything. People will play a game even if it has controversies, if the quality of the game is good. A great example of this would be maybe Grand Theft Auto. If you look at the storied history of Grand Theft Auto and its controversies, I mean, the game itself is kind of crazy. There's like freaking prostitutes in the damn game. You know what I'm saying? Like the game is extremely controversial, but it's also about to launch like the most successful game ever in like by next year, right? GTA 6 is going to come out and they've invested like $2 billion into it. So controversy is not necessarily bad. Sometimes it can even be good if you can, take the controversy and use it to build the hype of the game in some ways, which I don't think is the case for Marathon, but I do think was the case for GTA. But in this regard, the quality of the game is really what is going to sell it or do well. And I genuinely think that the criticisms of the game were valid and that this game is going to do extremely poor on PC, especially for the extraction shooter audience. The Tarkov people, I know a lot of them actually. They are completely uninterested in this game. And so they're not going to have a big PC audience at all in my perception, but they could very well, this could be a very strategic galaxy brain move here and actually grow a massive console audience, I wonder. And that's probably part of the reason why the game maybe, I'm not saying the exact reason why it looks a little watered down or why it wasn't extremely impressive, because they're kind of expecting it to be, made for PC and console. But that could be a contributing factor to maybe why it wasn't so enthusiastic to the immediate audience that saw it, or at least the PC players that saw it to some degree. Let me know if you're a console player, if you seem interested at all in Marathon. I don't know. We'll have to see what it looks like. We'll have to see. This will be a really interesting case study to see if they can use the console player and the console community to launch a game that would probably otherwise be very unsuccessful, and see if it can actually have some success.
And cheap tricks might not be enough this time. I do believe that if they stick to their old motto of making games that they want to play, then they'll probably earn a consistent player base back. Once that's rolling again, they need to desperately fix.
So what he's talking about is Bungie's original motto that they had on the side of their building and everything was, we make games that we want to play. And not that people thought that was pretentious necessarily, that was just like Bungie's motto. Like they made games that they themselves were enthusiastic about, right? And now their motto is like, we create worlds that build friendships, or something even like very watered down, right? They changed their whole slogan, right? And what he's arguing is that, Bungie as a creative entity should continue to make things that they themselves are passionate about. And there is a valid point here, because if you make things that you're truly passionate about, that passion will bleed into that game and it will likely be more successful than the alternative, which would be making a game that is going to sell well, making a game strictly for capitalism, making a game for money and money alone. Like, this is a game that's going to make $1 billion, right? If that was the headline, that won't take you as far as, I love this genre of game and I want to work on this for the next 20 years, right? That takes you way farther, the second one, because that's what builds games like Halo and Destiny. These games that, the devs and some of these game directors are truly very passionate about, very talented and passionate about, right? And those two in tandem is what I think kind of made some of that Bungie magic. And so what he's arguing is Bungie should stick to making stuff that they're passionate about. And I don't know. I don't know if Marathon is something that they were extremely passionate about. It doesn't seem like they're very passionate about it from all the former devs that left Bungie and gave leaked, information and testimony of like what the environment was like. It doesn't seem like they're especially passionate about it. So, and considering that they're being very strategic in their approach, that they're not just making some random genre of game that no one's ever heard of. They're intentionally choosing this extraction shooter genre because it's relatively untapped, especially in the console market. This is a business move more than anything. And by making this business move, they stand to make a lot of money only if the quality of the product is good enough to actually entice people, especially the console market. It's actually an interesting tightrope that Bungie is walking with this one, and we'll see what the result is when it does come out.
That onboarding system. Even if I shared my screen and walked a new player through the game, it's just taxing. I have to explain something like the Rose hand cannon is unobtainable except from Zur, who shows up on the weekends. And if he doesn't have it in his inventory, it's just unattainable. It's easier to just say it's unobtainable. But no, don't leave. I promise the game is fun. You don't have to jump through that many. Okay, you do have to jump through a lot of hoops, but it is fun. And to the Sherpa, good luck not finding the straw that breaks the new player's back, despite so much content in the game feeling magical for that first playthrough. They have to comfortably make it to that point in the game first. Good luck getting them there. I think I talked enough. Let's finally answer, hey Cam, do you still find the game fun? I still find the game fun. Loot is easier to get than ever, new armor system has me trying wild fun combos, and I still have many long-term skill goals that I haven't hit yet. I'm pretty much just going to keep playing till the wheels fall off. Let's hope Bungie does good work with their backs against the wall. Thank you for listening, and be kind in the comments section.
Sorry for angering 50% of you. The other 50%, please subscribe. Very nice. All right, that was generic Destiny hating algo slop number 247 from Cammycakes, and I actually thought he had a really good analysis of the situation, and obviously he has a unique perception. He's been around for a long time. He's an OG of the Destiny franchise, and definitely a legend within the PvP community and elsewhere. I mean, this guy's been doing really good content for a very long time, and it's cool hearing his opinion and his breakdown and his analysis of things. I agree with his opinions largely, and we'll see what the future holds now. The last opinion he gave was that he still enjoying the game, and that's the part where I have a weird mixture of opinions. Like, I'm still playing the game. I've just like measured my time out so casually now for like the first time in like pretty much all of Destiny history. I basically just log in, play for like 4 to 6 hours, like 5 days a week, and that's about it for me, and then I'm done. And so I'm not even like maximum level. I still got a lot of leveling to do. Thankfully, the portal has finally been fixed. I mean, it still is missing like 80% of the content in the game, but it's been fixed in terms of like the actual power grind isn't as tedious as it was previously. So now I'm currently in the process of leveling, getting ready for, the new dungeon and Renegades, getting ready for Festival of the Lost. And I'm still playing, even with all the criticism and backlash. I'm still playing the game. And I understand why others aren't, though, especially if you already hit maximum power a long time ago. And there's also just a lot of other good games to play out there right now. So there's no reason for you to not take a Destiny 2 break if you're not having fun in Destiny 2. Like Cammy here, I'm still logging in and playing pretty regularly.